You can see no matter how many times we go over to that link, we are always presented with the same server.
Today I'll be showing you how to set up or configure an HA or high availability setup for Apache Guacamole. With this setup, you can use 2 or more Apache Guacamoles in your environment to kind of load balance them and set up even load if you have multiple users between the Apache Guacamoles, or maybe you want to set them up in an active passive mode where one Apache Guacamole is active all the time, and if it goes down, then the other Apache Guacamole is going to kick up and make sure you always have access to your resources. So for this video, we're going to be setting up load balancing, or you can call it high availability, for Apache Guacamole. So we're using 2 Apache Guacamole servers. For our load balancing, we'll be doing round robin. So we'll evenly distribute the traffic or access from clients to Apache Guacamole between the 2 servers. And we're going to also set up sticky sessions, because if you just set up round robin, every time a user refreshes their page, since you're doing round robin between 2 or multiple servers, they might have to re-enter their credentials every single time. But if you do a sticky sessions, your load balancer is gonna be able to persist the user's session to the specific Apache Guacamole server that they hit at the time that they were trying to connect. So for this configuration, you're going to need at least 3 virtual machines. So 2 of those virtual machines are going to be Apache Guacamole servers. As you can see here, I have Guacamole server 1 and Guacamole server 2. And then you need at least one SQL server on a different virtual machine. This can be physical machines as well. It doesn't really matter. It is advisable that if you're doing the high availability setup, you should also have at least 2 MySQL servers configured to do replication between both of them. So if one is down, the other one is gonna still be up, and you always have your Apache Guacamole setup running. But for this tutorial, we're just using one MySQL server, but we're having 2 Apache Guacamoles. Both of the Apache Guacamoles are going to be connected to the MySQL server. Um, Once again, to make this even more secure, you should make sure that you encrypt the connection to the database if you're using this if you're using this in an unsecure network. If you're using this internally, it might not be a problem for you, but either way, you want to make sure you encrypt this connection here between Apache Guacamole and MySQL, since you're running on separate servers. We're not going to do that in this video because I'm assuming everything here, we're running it internally. Even though I'm doing this on the cloud, it's a test environment, so I really don't care. So we're going to already have 2 Apache Guacamole servers installed. So you are going to have to install your own Apache Guacamole servers. If you don't know how to do that, you can watch my videos and use the installation script. For this video, I'm going to show you how to install and set up your own MySQL server for your Apache Guacamole high availability setup. So we're going to install an SQL server and we're going to configure it, but we are not going to encrypt the communication. Once again, I'm assuming this is an internal network. And then we're going to use HAProxy as the load balancer between the 2 Apache Guacamoles. I have done some research and I know you can use Nginx Proxy Manager to do load balancing as well, but it requires a lot of extra steps for you to do. So as part of this video, I'm not going to do that. We're just going to use HAProxy because it's very easy to do, and HAProxy 2 is a really good load balancer and reverse proxy if you're going to use it for that as well. So without talking too much, we're going to head straight right into the lab. So I'm going to bring up my browser here. Okay, and we're going to be working with Linode. So if I go ahead and copy the IP address of our first Apache Guacamole server and I paste that in the browser, we get a certificate warning, obviously. You can see here we have our first Apache Guacamole server. Okay. If I copy the IP address of the second one and I paste it here, there goes our second Apache Guacamole server. Okay. I changed the branding on here to look different from this one. And the reason why I'm doing that is so we can tell the difference between both of the servers. So we know every time we do the round robin connection, we can tell if we are working on server one or server two. So now that we know that those work, we're going to log in here as Guac admin, the default Guacamole user. And you can see as of now, we have no connections on the first server. And we'll do the same for the second one. We're going to log in as Guac admin. And we have no connections as well. Okay. So now that we have that out of the way, we're going to head over to the command line and I am going to start the installation process. So once again, you need to have your Apache Guacamole installed on two separate servers. I'm not going to show you how to do that on this video. You can watch my other videos on how to do that. And now you're also going to have another extra server. And this server, we're going to use it to install MySQL. So in order for us to install MySQL, it is simple as running the basic command sudo apt install MariaDB. In our case, we're using MariaDB. You can use MySQL as well, but I'll just use MariaDB and we'll install MariaDB server. Okay, I already have that installed. If you don't, it is going to go through the prompts and you're going to hit yes and you can install MariaDB server. And once you're done installing your MariaDB server, the next thing we want to do is log into the MariaDB server. Okay, so I don't have any other users created for my MariaDB server. I advise when you install this server, you should go through the proper steps to secure MariaDB server. That is beyond this video, but we're going to go ahead and log in to our database using the root user. So I'm just going to type the command MySQL, and as you can see, we are inside of the database. So before we do anything else, you need to head over to the Apache Guacamole website. And once you head over to this website, you need to make sure you download the Apache Guacamole auth JDBC because we're going to be setting up MySQL authentication. So once you download that, you're going to have a folder that looks like this. And once you open up that folder, you want to go into MySQL and then you want to copy this schema file using SFTP and transfer it to your server that you want to use as your MySQL server. Once again, I assume you know how to move files between your machine to another server. You can use SFTP to do that. So if we go back in here to the command line, if I exit and I do ls, you can see I have that schema folder already loaded into this server. So I'm going to go back into my SQL, and it is at this point where we're going to start by creating our Guacamole database. Okay, we're going to run the command create database guacamole db, and you shouldn't get any errors. And once you do that, we're going to quit. And then now we are going to load the schema, the Apache Guacamole database schema, into our Guacamole DB database that we just created. So I'll do ls, and you can see here we have two schemas. We have the create schema and we have the create admin user SQL scripts. So we'll run these two scripts and they're going to load up the required tables and everything we need for our Apache Guacamole setup. All of this is normally done when you use the Apache Guacamole installed script, installation script. So on those two Apache Guacamole servers that I showed you, they already have a database running, but we want them to use a central database so that they can share everything, such as connections, users, and it doesn't matter which server you log into, you're always going to see the same thing because they're using the same database backend, except for extensions. You're going to have to load your extensions such as Duo and the other ones on both servers. But so to load that schema into our database, we're going to run the command cat. So we're going into the schema directory and we're looking for anything that ends with with SQL, and we're going to load that into our Guacamole DB database as the root user. Okay, and that was done. So for us to confirm that, we're going to go back into, going to exit here and clear my screen. So we're going to go back into my SQL, and if we do show databases, we can see our database we created. If we do use Guacamole DB and we do show tables, now we have a whole bunch of tables created because of the schema that we loaded, the schema script that we loaded into our MySQL database. So we're good here now. The next command we need to do is create a Guacamole user that both of Apache Guacamole servers are going to use to connect to the database in the backend. So we're going to run the command create user followed by the username. You should not use this. You should enter the IP addresses of your both servers. You can do that and do a comma and enter the second IP addresses because we want to lock this down. This symbol here just says that the user can connect with any remote IP address. Once again, if you're running this on your internal network that is secure, it's really not going to matter. But if you're running it in an unsecure network, then you might want to lock that down. So it's up to you. This is just a tutorial, so we're doing the basics. Okay. And then you want to follow that by your password. Obviously, you want to use a better password. I'm using an easy to remember password. So we'll create that user and then we'll grant the necessary permissions that that user needs by running the following command: grant select, insert, update, delete to the Guacamole DB for the Guacamole user. Okay. Once again, I have all these commands in the description section below, so you can just copy and paste. And the last thing we'll do is we'll flush the privileges and then we'll quit. Okay. To exit the database. So once we're done with that, now we have everything set up. What you want to note here is your password, because the Guacamole user is going to be the same. So our password is very secure user password. We're going to head over to our first Guacamole server. Okay. And then here we want to cd into Etsy Guacamole. Okay, I spelled that wrong. And then we want to open the Guacamole configuration file, which is guacamole.properties. So you use nano and you open up that file. And here we can see that we have our regular SQL configuration for Apache Guacamole. So we're going to change the host. You want to change the host name to your IP address of your SQL server. In my case, that's 45.79.132.127. Okay. And then the port, we're going to leave it as default 3306. And the database is the same, Guacamole DB. Username is the same. And the password here changed. Okay. So our new password is very secure user password. Okay. Save that. And before we go to the next server, we're going to test that real quick and make sure it works. So for us to know that this actually works, we're going to do restart of Tomcat. So we're going to do systemctl restart Tomcat 9. Okay. And once you restart Tomcat 9, we note here my IP address for my first server ends with 110. So we're going to go ahead and try to refresh access to that server. So if you got an error page like I did, obviously, and you're using MariaDB specifically, you want to head into the directory etc slash mysql slash mariadb dot conf dot d, and if you ls, there's a file here called 50-server.conf. So we need to set up our MySQL server to accept connections from any IP address. So here you're going to have 127.0.0.1, which is localhost. So you want to change this to 0.0.0.0, which just means MySQL should listen on all interfaces and accept connections. Okay. If you have multiple interfaces and you want to specify an interface, you can put the IP address of that interface on here. Okay, so we're going to fix that. Once you fix that, make sure you restart um, MariaDB or MySQL. And once you do that, we're going to head back over to the browser and we'll refresh the page. Okay, and as you can see here, we are presented with the Apache Guacamole login page. So we're going to test that our login actually works. So we'll log in as guac admin, and boom, we're able to log into the server. So we're going to go back here to our Apache Guacamole server, and we're going to do the same for our second Guacamole server. So we're going to change to the etc Guacamole directory, and then we're going to use nano to open our Guacamole properties file. And once we do that, you want to also change the IP address here to your MariaDB server's IP address. And once you do that, the only other thing we need to do is change our password. So we're going to go ahead and restart Tomcat as well. And once we do that, if we head over to our second server and we refresh, we should also be presented with a login screen. And once you get that login screen, you're going to log in as Guac admin for both servers. And once you're done, boom, you can see we're logged in. If we go into settings and users, we have just one user. We'll do the same thing here. Go into settings, users, we have just one user. So I'm going to create a user here and I'll call this user John Doe. And we'll create another user. We'll call this Mary Jane. Once we're done, we're going to create some connections as well. So we'll do an RDP connection. We'll just call this RDP1. Change that to RDP. We're not going to put any IP address. We're going to do an SSH connection. Change this to SSH just so we can create connections. Do save. And now you can see we have some new users and some new connections. If we head back to our second Apache Guacamole server and if we refresh that, you can see the users reflect over here as well. And the connections reflect over here as well because we're using the same database. So this is going to be consistent no matter where the user logs in, they're going to have the same thing. So this shared database only works for users, connections, and login. With your extensions, if you're using Duo, you're going to have to put it on both of the servers. And if you're using TOTP, you're going to have to use it on both of the servers, obviously. Okay, so now that we have that set up, the next thing and the last thing we're going to do is set up HAProxy. Okay, so we're going to go back to the command line and we'll head over to our HAProxy virtual machine. And the only thing we need to do here is run the command sudo apt install HAProxy. And once you do that, your Linux or Ubuntu machine is going to go ahead and install the latest version of HAProxy for you. And then we'll clear that. And now we want to head into the HAProxy directory. So that's in etc HAProxy. And then we want to open the HAProxy configuration file. Okay. And in here, we have a bunch of default configuration. I'm not going to go deep into HAProxy. We're just going to create a front end and a back end and proxy or load balance our Apache Guacamole real quick. If you guys want to learn more about HAProxy, you can leave it down in the comment section below and I can make a future video about that. But we're just going to leave everything as default and I'm going to copy and paste my HAProxy configuration in here. Once again, this is going to be included in the description section so you can copy and follow along. So basically, we create the front end and we'll just call this secure connect underscore front end. And then we're binding it to SSL. So we want to use port 443 and we're providing an SSL certificate, which is a wildcard certificate. You can use a wildcard certificate too. That's easy to create with Let's Encrypt. I'm not going to do that in this video, but I have other videos that I show you how to create Let's Encrypt certificates. HAProxy also has a documentation to use Setbot to auto create the certificates and so forth. I'll leave that in the description section below. If you want me to make a video on that as well, you can leave it down in the comment section and we'll work on it as well. So if you notice, the most important part here is that we're doing for the back end, we're doing a round robin. So if you want to know more about round robin, you can Google it and read about it. But round robin with multiple servers, it's basically going to move clients to the next available server. So if client A connects, they're going to go to server 1, client B is going to go to server 2, and so forth. Okay. And then we're going to use the option forward because we want to send the real IP address to our clients, to our server, which is the Apache Guacamole server. And then we're setting a cookie so we can do that sticky connection. So if a user connects for the first time and they're connected to the first Guacamole server, that cookie is going to make sure they're always connected to that server until their session is ended and so forth. So we set the cookie and we're doing no cache. And then now we set our server communications and we are not verifying the SSL certificates because remember our two Guacamole servers are using self-signed certificates. Okay, so this is a basic setting you need to get this working. Once again, you can read more about HAProxy or I can make a video if you want, but you have to leave that down in the comment section below to go into more detail. But this basic configuration here should get you working. Okay, you can change this secure connect backend to whatever you want to call it, and the same for the secure connect front end. So once we do that, remember to change your IP addresses here of your Guacamole servers, and then we're going to save that and we'll restart HAProxy. Okay. And if you restart HAProxy, you shouldn't get any errors. If you get any errors, you want to look at the logs and make sure you have everything set up correctly. Now we're going to head back to the browser and we're going to go to our fully qualified domain name for our Apache Guacamole server, which is set to connect to the HAProxy server. Okay, so you want to go into your DNS provider record and you want to create a new record like I have here and put the IP address of your HAProxy server. Okay, and we're calling that guac. And once you have that done, if you check here, the IP address is the same with the HAProxy IP. And then we're going to come to the browser, and if we type guac.geektogether.com, you can see we are presented with the second Apache Guacamole server, which is this one here. Okay, so I'm going to log in here as John Doe. And as you can see, we are successfully logged into our Apache Guacamole server. And John Doe has access to no connections because I didn't assign him to any connections. So if we go back and re-log in, you can see no matter how many times we go over to that link, we are always presented with the same server because we set up sticky connections. Okay. So I'm going to log in here as Guac admin. And now you can see we have all the connections in here. If we go to settings, we can see the users and everything else. So now that we've confirmed that we can access our Apache Guacamole server and the load balancer is working as expected, we're going to go on another device here, which is my mobile device, and we're going to test it and see if we are going to be connected to the same Apache Guacamole server. So I'm going to do here guac.geektogether.com, and I want to do HTTPS. Okay. And once you do that, you can see we are presented with our second Apache Guacamole server. You can see this one has no branding, so this is definitely the other one we set up. So we're gonna call this here. We're gonna log in as Guac admin, and then Guac admin. And once we log in, we're able to see the same thing. Okay. If we log out, and no matter how many times we refresh this page, we are always going to be presented with this specific Apache Guacamole, again, because of the sticky connections. So now that we've tested and we've verified that our load balancing and everything with Apache Guacamole is working, we need to do some cleanup. So the last thing we need to do here is remove the current localhost MySQL server that is running on both Apache Guacamoles. So we're going to run the command sudo apt auto remove mariadb, or we're going to change that to MySQL. And if you run that, that should automatically remove the MySQL installation on the server. So we're going to do that on the second server. Yes. And we're going to also remove the MySQL that was originally installed on this server using the script. Okay. If we head back over to the browser and we try again, we are still able to access our Apache Guacamole just fine. So if you made it this far, I'm hoping everything went all right with your setup. So this brings us to the end of this video. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, you can leave it down in the comment section below.